Good morning, y'all. This is Mr. Walker here, coming to you with our notes for segments, rays, parallel lines, and planes. Now, hopefully, you're able to get the stuff from our previous bit of notes. If you don't, remember, we need to go on a Google Classroom and check our digital notebook so that you can go through and get all that information. So, let's get it cracking with this. We got several words that we got to define using the stuff that we have already talked about. So, let's get started. All right, at the beginning, we got segment. Segment is a part of a line consisting of two endpoints and all the collinear points in between them. So over here, we have the shape of a line, but we're cutting off the two arrows at the end and just naming this from point A to point B. Now, these two are endpoints. Anytime you see these dots, you can make them an endpoint and you can name this any particular way. You can call this AB or you can call it BA. You just have to make sure you're naming it with the endpoints in mind so that I know that I'm looking at this area in between A and B. Otherwise, it's open season. So you got to make sure that you're real deliberate with what you are trying to name. All right. Next thing we got is a ray. Now, a ray is part of a line consisting of one endpoint and all the collinear points that extend in the opposite direction. So, it's just like how we had with a segment, a ray has an endpoint, but after the other point, it keeps going on and on and on and on and on and on into the other direction. Now, obviously, we can't extend this because we'd run out of screen, but you can understand that this arrow here means that it is still going past it. Now, when we name this, we have to make sure that we name this with the shape in mind. Wherever the endpoint is, which is A for us, that has to be by the endpoint of the symbol on top of it. B, since is where the arrow is pointing to, has to be where the arrow for the symbol is pointing. You're not going to name this as if it is over here. See, this is pointing over to A, which means that over A is where it starts to extend off at. So you have to be deliberate with which way you are writing that symbol. Otherwise, you're getting it wrong. Now, along with rays, we got a little smaller definition. We have opposite rays. Opposite rays are two collinear rays with a with sorry, not with a with the same endpoint. So essentially, I can make another ray going this way, and since both this ray and this ray are on the same line, that means that they come together, they make a straight line, and they are opposite each other. All right, next one that we got, we're talking about parallel lines. Parallel lines are coplanar lines that do not intersect. Segments and rays are parallel if they lie in parallel lines. So, in our example right here, we have this shape. It's made up of six planes, one in the front, one in the back, the side, the top, and the bottom. All of these planes have parallel lines on them. An example of this we got is AB and DC. See, AB and DC, they both happen to not touch, and they are also part of the same plane. So, whenever you're talking about parallel lines, they have to be a part of the same plane and they are not intersecting. So, you wouldn't say that line AB here is parallel with CB because these two will eventually touch over here at B. They have to not intersect. So, if they touch at a point, they're not parallel. All right. Now we got a couple other situations that go with this shape, so keep this shape in mind. And also, when you're dealing with parallel, because I don't want to forget to say this, instead of writing the word parallel, because honestly, I don't want you to get locked into misspelling this, because it does have three L's, and some people will forget either the first L or the second L or the third L. Just it always happens. This symbol that's in between these two lines here, this is the symbol for parallel. So if you ever had to say AB is parallel to DC, rather than writing it out, you can write it with these two lines here. All right, now back to our next definition. We got skew lines. Skew lines are non-planar lines that do not intersect. So it is similar to parallel where they don't intersect, but the difference is you're dealing with lines that aren't on the same plane. In our example here, we got AB in the front of this shape and GF in the back. Now, these are on two different planes. And even though it looks like they might touch, you got to keep in mind this line here, GF, is in the back of this shape. Think of it as like this is in the back of the room, this is the front of the room. Now, the front of the room and the back of the room, they aren't going to touch no matter what. Okay, they're in two different places. So, when you're talking about skew lines, that's what you should be thinking about. You're thinking about those lines and how they do not touch and they are a part of two different sides entirely. All right, last definition we got here is parallel planes. Parallel planes are planes that do not intersect. So essentially, we're just talking about two different sides of our room here. So imagine this is where your door is, this is where the wall is. The door, well, the door, the wall where your window is. Let's be more specific. Sorry about that. Imagine these are on two different walls. These two do not intersect, they don't touch. If they did, you would notice that they would have a side that they both have in common. So these two, they're both parallel. And that's the end of our definitions, y'all. All right, so folks, we got a couple of practice questions here. I want you to go through and try it, give the video a pause, and come back, and then we'll go over it. Now, if you choose to stay and don't do it, I mean, that's understandable. Some people will do that, but I don't think that'll be most of you. So, good luck. All right, welcome back, folks. Hopefully, you actually went through and paused it and gave these a good college try. So, let's go through and go over them. All right, first off, we're talking about number one here. Ooh, sorry, folks. That was a bird that just hit my window. We are naming all the segments parallel to line AB. Now, let's just go through. Let's make sure that we're identifying where AB is. AB is this backside of this plane here on the bottom of this shape. So when we're naming lines that are parallel to AB, we want to make sure that they are on the same side and they do not touch that. So let's go through, let's identify what that side is. That side is from D to A, so coming down here, from A to B, from B to E, and from E to D. So it's this four-sided shape right here. I'll also go through and highlight that real quick. Let's change that color. Perfect. All right, so this side right here, DEAB, this is the side that AB is on. If you were to name a segment that is parallel to it, it has to be the side of this shape that does not touch AB. Now, it's not going to be over here where DA is or EB. It would have to be the top where DE is at. Now, DE and AB, they both are on the same side. They don't touch. So that's what we're going to have. Now, next one we got here, it asks you to name a pair of parallel lines, parallel planes, and skew lines. So let's go through. There's a lot of jazz in here. Remember, just like we talked about with number one, if we're talking about parallel lines, we're talking about two lines on the same side that do not touch. Here's a couple of examples for you. You could say that DE is parallel to AB, just like we did for number one. You could say AC is parallel to DF. So AC is over here and DF is up top. You could also say AD, and that's over here, and BE. Now, there is another set of sides. You could say EB and FC. That also works. But again, there's a couple different ones. Next up, we're talking about parallel planes. We're talking about two sides of this shape here that do not touch. Now, right now, the only ones I know that don't touch look like this bottom triangle here and this top triangle here on this shape. So when you name those, you can name them with any 3 points on that plane. So I would say DEF is parallel to ABC because those don't touch. Okay. You can tell that they touch is if they have any points and lines in common. Okay. If they don't, they're not the same. All right. Next one we're talking about is skew lines. Skew lines are two lines that are not on the same plane that are not going to intersect. Here's one example that I'll give you. We got DE and CF. DE is right over here, and CF is right here. They're not on the same side, and they're not going to touch each other at all. So they are skew. All right, next bit of examples here we got is naming three collinear points. Now, remember, collinear, that means the same line. So when we're naming 3 points on the same line, there's only, looks like, four on this diagram, and only three of them are on a line together, and they would be A, B, and C. See, these three happen to be on this line here in the middle. So that's going to be what you have. All right, next it says name a plane containing E. If you remember, naming a plane lets you identify what you're exactly talking about on this shape. You can name a plane by either using the capital script letter in the corner or any three non-collinear points that happen to be on that plane. We say non-collinear because we have to be able to be specific about talking about a plane versus a line. And in this case, if I used A, B, and C, which all happen to be in a straight line, that doesn't really tell me which one of these two planes we're talking about. It doesn't tell me if I'm talking about the up and down plane or the plane that's going from the front to the back. So we got to use either that capital letter or three non-collinear points. So you can say R, which is that corner right here where E is also inside of that shape. Or you can say ABE, you could say BCE, you could say EAC. There's definitely a lot of different ways that you can do this. All right. Next one we got here, it says name the intersection of R and Q. R and Q are both these two planes respectively. And if you remember from our reading, a plane intersects with another plane at a line. So, what's the name of this line here? You can call this line AC. You can also call it AB, or you can call it BC, but AC covers all the bases. So, that's what we got right there. All right, down here we got a couple of easy ones. We got to go through and sketch these different things. Now, remember what I told you earlier with these definitions. If you're sketching or making these different things, you have to look at what symbol they have on top. So, first up for number one, this symbol up top of this JK is a line segment. So, you make two dots where your J and your K are, and you just connect them. And that's a line segment. Now, for number two, you see how it's written out. We got an endpoint, we got the arrow pointing off over the T. So we have one M where M is, and the other side, this should be a T. My fault about that. And it's going off to the other side, extending past. You don't have to keep going off into forever. Just make sure that you have that arrow to basically show that part. Same thing's going to be popping off on number three. We got T as our endpoint, and M as a point going into that other direction. Now for number four, we got two opposite rays. Things to note. See how they both have the same letter for their endpoint? That point should be in between in between C and A. So we have B in the middle, we got A on the right, C on the left, and those two sides are where those arrows are pointed off at. And that is our two opposite rays. Now, the good thing about opposite rays is that it just forms a line. So it's nice and easy for us to deal with. All right, next up, we got 6 statements that you're going to want to make sure that you know if they're always, sometimes, or never true. So let's go through and deal with this. Remember, a lot of these things we've already defined in our glossary and in our readings. So, two planes that do not intersect are always going to be parallel. Okay? So if you have two planes that don't intersect, they are always going to be parallel. Next one we got two opposite rays always form a line. If you connect two rays that are going in the opposite directions of each other, they're always going to make a line. Always. Now, Two lines in intersecting planes are sometimes skew. Sometimes. There might be a case where you have two planes that intersect and you have sides where they won't go through and touch. Like if you're talking about this shape over here, this side intersects with this one on the bottom, but I can say that BC is skew to DA because these two are not running in the same direction. Okay. It may look like they overlap, but that's a form of perspective. Okay. You got to look at this like if you turn it around, that side is never going to touch this side. Okay. Now, next one we got two parallel lines are always coplanar. If they are parallel, that means that they are on the same plane. Next, it says TU and UT are never the same ray. Reasons why they're never. You note the name, you note the way that the arrow's pointing. Over here, the arrow's pointing over the U. Over here, it's pointing over the T. That means these two are not pointing in the same direction and therefore are not the same. Now, what's the difference between this one and this one here is that this one is sometimes. That's because you can have a line like this. Let me go through and make a line here. You can have our line that we're going to make into our ray. See how both of these have D involved? D is the same endpoint, but E and T are just 2 points flowing into that other area where that arrow is pointing. So it could either be right next to each other, it could be E then T or T then E, but both of them are going the other way from D. So again, a lot of different ways they can go through and deal with, okay? All right, people. I will catch you guys later. Make sure that this gets into your book. And thank you for watching. See you later.